Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast. We were out last week, so we apologize for no episode last week, but we are back. Actually, I'm back solo. Mike is out this week. He should be back next week, but subbing in for him as a recurring guest who's been on the show multiple times. I still call him a new resident of the United States. He's still in that honeymoon phase here in the United States, over here on the West Coast. Formerly of the Insider, but he now has new outlets that he's working for after leaving the Insider within the last few months or so. Journalist and reporter Alan Dawson joins us again. Thank you for joining us, Al.
Oh, thanks for having me, Danny. And now that Mike's not here, we can badmouth him a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm going to send it to him right after. He's going to be the first guy who listens to all of this. So as I just touched on, Al, you came over here from the UK on behalf of the Insider. You moved to Las Vegas, working for the Insider. You were there for a while. When did you actually? I know we touched on it before, but for somebody who's listening for the first time today, who hasn't heard you before, when did you actually? When was your first day in the United States?
January 31st, 2022. So it's pretty much 18 months that I've been in America, and I haven't left yet. I've been here the whole time. Yeah, it's been pretty sweet. 2022 felt like a real MMA town for Vegas. Like UFC is just so dominant here, and I kind of wasn't. I knew how big they were, but I wasn't expecting them to dominate the combat sports scene so much. But it really feels like this year is just all boxing, and like I know we're going to get into some review stuff, but the events that I've seen this year, from March all the way through to last weekend, I'm just completely blown away by one, performance level of certain athletes, like Herculean efforts, and two, just the magnitude of the events that are being put together and the momentum boxing has. I feel like it's really starting to restore its spot as the number one combat sport. I know this is a boxing show and people won't like to hear that, but I feel like UFC is really did overtake boxing. At the start of the pandemic, UFC came out the gate so quickly to put on shows behind the scenes, and their shows were big. Justin, in the very first show back in front of an empty arena, Justin Gaethje put on a clinic against Tony Ferguson. That was like a Fight of the Year nominee. And boxing was just so slow to come out the gate. And we were putting on small hall shows, like of that caliber fights. And I feel like that kind of led into last year quite a lot as well. I don't think we really had one, what I would call, mega event. But this year, it's just like, every single month we've got something huge. And I don't think the UFC has, because, Conor McGregor's won't he come back, and, Francis Ngannou left, and feel like, we should have had John Jones and Ngannou. But yeah, the big fight's happening in boxing now, and it's amazing to be a part of the business, as a reporter on the media side, especially in Las Vegas, because it just feels a lot of the stuff has been going on here.
Absolutely. And, as we touched on multiple times in the last few minutes, you were with the Insider up until recently. So for everybody listening right now who's wondering, like, hey, Al, what happened? You're with the Insider. They moved you over here to the United States. Now you're not. Now you're with these other outlets, which we'll elaborate in a second. Just explain to me and to the listeners, how you got to where you're at as of today.
Yeah, I mean, even I was at Insider for like 7 years, and 5 of those years were in the UK newsroom. I was the first sports hire in the UK newsroom, and I was covering soccer, tennis, boxing and MMA, and the combat sports side just got so big that I said, we need to bring in other people to do the sports that I like, but I just want to focus on fights. So we grew, and we had a team of like maybe at one point maybe 10 people, and that Insider was growing rapidly as well. I think at one point there was probably 1,200 employees with bureaus all over the world. And I don't think during my time there in 7 years, there'd been one round of layoffs. And then there was a round of layoffs in April. And pretty much the entire sports team was a part of that, and so was I. And I don't hold any ill will towards, I think you've just got to accept it. If you're in media, you're going to get laid off, every now and then. I think that's only my second layoff. It's actually my third. That's happened to me quite a few times. But the first,
hopefully it's the last time.
Yeah. Although I'm not going to count it out. But now I'm independent, so it's like I'm going to be my own boss. But yeah, the first time it happened was at goal.com, and that was like the world's biggest soccer website. It was laid off there in 2011. Where else was I laid off? A company that I'm not going to mention because it was I was kind of in between phase, and it wasn't really something I'm putting on my resume. And then I was at BT Sport. That helped me get the job at Insider. And to be fair, in those 7 years I was there, it really was the making of me as a reporter and journalist. The sort of stories they were covering, and politics and tech and all these other beats, digital culture, YouTube, exposing sex scandals, harassment, political corruption. It really made me think, why aren't I doing that on boxing? I should be if I'm working at this company that's doing all these other things. So that's one of the reasons I got into, trying to scrutinize the involvement of, people like Daniel Kinahan in the sport. And last year, I wrote about this court case that was basically making it seem that there were suspicions or allegations of bribery and corruption in American boxing between basically buying rankings from the WBA. So that's still in a court case. And all those sort of stuffs won the Boxing Writers Awards. So yeah, I had a really good run at Insider. Definitely was the making of me. Really reshaped me quite a lot that I'm realizing now, because I'm coming back into the boxing side, and it's making me realize how corporatized I probably was at, Insider, Business Insider. And I can, probably re-find who I was before maybe and figure out my identity as a media person going forward. So I was told on these that I was a part of these layoffs in April. I was a member of the union now, so I couldn't actually be laid off there and then because the union was bargaining, for severance and things like that. So my last official day was June 5th. Before that, though, I'd already hooked up with a talent agent. It's called Eric Winter. So he used to work.
Oh, he was. I think he worked for UFC.
Yeah,
is that him? And then he was also with, I think, Top Rank for a little bit.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
So he's been giving me business advice, and really, really good ear to bend. He's been around combat sports for a long time, particularly in America. I'd got job offers already, so I just contacted a few people. Barely sent my resume out. I was really, really fortunate. I think the difference between being laid off now and being laid off when would it have been 11 years ago for the first time is that it took me so long to get back into sports media. But this time I feel like maybe my name's already out there a little bit more than what I realized. And I've now been able to sign deals with ProBox TV. I'm their news editor, Fight Hype videographer for boxing and MMA, but they want me to be the face of their MMA coverage. I'm going to do a weekly column with the Sporting Tribune for boxing and MMA. The first one's coming out tomorrow, I hope. And I'm going to do some feature writing for Premier Boxing Champions. I'm also speaking to one more client. But yeah, the whole point is to set up this business now and kind of funnel all this through, regular ongoing work with certain companies. Trying to follow the kind of Ariel Helwani route rather than being so reliant on one employer.
Are you thinking about, you touched on going the Ariel Helwani route. He has his MMA hour and it's very popular, and, he gets pretty big guests and stuff. And now that you're independent, would you think about jumping into the podcast game or kind of getting your own show, or what do you think?
I mean, there's things that I think I'd like to do that on Fight Hype, though. There's definitely ideas I want to do on Fight Hype. I don't want to do kind of this traditional YouTube media. I've got kind of ideas of how, I want to do it more like local news, how they do it. So you've got somebody outside a building with a microphone and you're kind of talking like a news anchor or presenter. So I kind of want to approach it like that. And yeah, I've got more, I think I want to I'm open to, I have set up YouTube and Rumble and Substack accounts in Alan Dawson Sport, standard handles that I've got on other social media just to park them. But yeah, I'm still thinking of using, my writing skills to branch out in maybe other areas of boxing media. But because of the contacts you make. As soon as I moved into America, the contacts I made were just like, I don't know. I felt like I was making far more inroads over here than I ever did in Britain.
Mm-hmm. So you are independent, as you mentioned. So is there one or the other where you're going to be spending more of your time in terms of the outlets that you mentioned?
ProBox TV will definitely take up a bit of my time. But the thing is, a lot of the work's kind of like, I'm kind of doing this with my hands, but it's like kind of feeds into one another. Like if I'm doing an interview with, say, I don't know, like Leonard Ellaby, he's here in Las Vegas. I could write about it, send some news to ProBox. The video, like on different parts of the video, can go out on Fight Hype. All these kind of things go. You get paid twice for the same or similar piece of work, and just figuring out where that kind of content goes. Eric Nixick, MMA coach that's based here, that could easily go out on two, clients, one written and one, I could write a column on, how he's going to coach Sean Strickland for the upcoming Israel Adesanya title fight, or how he thinks Francis Ngannou could fare against Tyson Fury, because he works with both those fighters, Ngannou and Strickland. Could do a column on that, and then again send the video to Fight Hype. So I feel like I'm probably at the moment the clients are kind of skewed more towards boxing than they are in MMA. But I'm working on that, so I'm trying to get another client in MMA or both as well. But I feel like after one more, I think that will probably be my schedule done for the rest of the year. But yeah, really pleased with how it's worked out. Could have easily been quite stressful to, not only lose your job, but then, be a deportation risk. And we've bought a house here, literally about like 6 weeks, I think, before I got told I was being laid off.
Oh, wow.
But I feel like looking back, it's like I'd much rather have bought the house then than like now, because I don't know, it seems like, now we're here, we're already paying the mortgage. And but like, it could have easily been stressful, and it didn't, and it wasn't too bad in the end.
In those 18 months, Al, that you were here in the United States and Las Vegas, obviously primarily for the Insider, what's the one moment that you'll remember from those 18 months, that first 18-month ride?
When I was like, there were a couple of stories that I wrote at the back end of last year, and it just seemed like all of a sudden the big fights were happening, or that there was significant talks to, like, I was kind of getting the sort of background on why the Spence Crawford negotiations fell apart. But then like a week before, maybe not a week before, I think I'm getting the timing wrong. I think I first reported on Spence Crawford like in July, and then like a month later I found out that, the Davis and Garcia's camp were talking. And just to go from there to then seeing those fights happen now, with Davis Garcia in, when did that happen? I think April 22nd. And then Spence Crawford finally come together, and having that on July 29th, and just being able to be in the venue for those two shows. Benavidez Plan as well. I love that. I feel like that kicked off everything as well. That was such a high quality event, that wasn't just, usually boxing is just so top heavy for the main event, but it felt like that show was just a, big celebration of, Mexican-American fighters. I know Ramos was on the undercard, looking good as well. And I feel like PBC is really getting, like, I don't think maybe this, people haven't noticed this, but PBC is really putting Ramos on a really high platform.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, it's like he's always on the main card for these massive pay-per-view shows. And I feel like they're actually telling us something, like this guy's going to be a pay-per-view headliner.
He can fight.
Keep on getting used to this guy, paying for this guy, rather than him being on, say, the normal Showtime Championship boxing. He's a Showtime pay-per-view fighter now. I feel like that Benavidez Plan event that really kicked everything off. And then, a month later, Davis Garcia, Haney Lomachenko was the next month. Spence Crawford. And then we've got, Canelo, Charlo next month. I feel like we're probably going to get another reasonably big boxing show here before the end of the year as well. And I've even heard rumors that, the Raiders owner, Mark Davis, he's apparently, like, I wouldn't say desperate, but he's really, really eager to bring a boxing fight into, the Allegiant Stadium. And it just depends what fight that is. I think it would be great, but I personally think that people should focus on, and I even said this to a few, like, I don't want to tell people how to do their jobs, but I can't help but say, you should do this, put a fight at the Sphere. Have you seen the Sphere?
Yeah, it looks awesome.
That, because it's a one tier. It's all just one tier. So it's not an arena that, with the seats going all the way around the ring. The ring would be on stage like a concert hall, and then there'd be 15,000 seats. Like the atmosphere that you could have for that would be like an old school Colosseum or something. And it's, I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm sure it's like 1,000 times bigger than a cinema screen, because all of the screens are like in front of you, behind you, right above you. The sound systems are, just as advanced, but the screens are also on the exterior of the Sphere. So I was thinking you could broadcast a part of it to the parking lot that they've got there and have sell tickets as a drive-through. So you could do like $1,000 average ticket on the inside for a massive event at the Sphere, and then charge $100 for a car coming in with like 5 people in an SUV or something. Have pop-up food trucks. And you could do what the F1 is threatening here, where they're going to put up, obstructions if, various casinos aren't going to pay them $2.5 million. You could do that to prevent people from seeing it who aren't paying. But the only thing I find jarring about boxing in Las Vegas is at the moment is you're putting the events on at the T-Mobile Arena. And right when you walk into the T-Mobile Arena, there's this massive sign with UFC fighters saying this is the home of the UFC. Yeah. So it's like you're putting boxing's biggest events in the MMA market leader's home. To me, it's the home of the Golden Knights, really. But the UFC does have 3 or 4 big pay-per-view shows there a year, and they've just got the sort of marketing and the branding already in the arena. There's like UFC, the acronym is like on one of the in the middle tier, so you can see it wherever you are. The good thing about MGM Grand Garden Arena when boxing was there is it just felt there was so much history in that venue for boxing, and it feels like the UFC is already kind of cornering the history for T-Mobile Arena a little bit. That's how I feel. So that's why I think boxing should kind of pivot and go to the Sphere, and maybe have a big one at the Allegiant. I can't remember what you asked now, but I've gone a complete tangent.
Well, you touched on the F1 going to Vegas, and obviously that's a big deal. And then there's politics happen in the city about, blocking the views if they don't pay a premium, these hotels and all that. So they're trying to sort through all that. But that, I'm not sure how long the F1 it lasts. Do you know how long it's going to last during that time?
I think the chaos would be a while, but I think it will be. I think it'll be a whole week thing. But there's already going to be events like on the periphery from other sports. Right. Shakur Stevenson is going to be fighting on the Saturday,
right,
Las Vegas, against a to be determined opponent. And
do you think any other promoter is going to try to capitalize on that event, like that whole week event? Because there's going to be a lot of high profile people and a lot of people with a lot of money around that city.
I think Top Rank's kind of already cornered it in a boxing sense. I'm not sure if the UFC will try and, maybe they will, because Dana White obviously has got this rivalry and animosity towards Bob Arum. But I feel like for boxing, Top Rank's kind of already cornered that. I can't imagine them putting Shakur Stevenson in Virgin Hotels or Resorts World, where Top Rank has used those 2 facilities for events that might sell 2,000-3,000 tickets. Shakur's way too big for those arenas. It would have to be MGM Grand again at the very minimum. And then what else is there? Is it T-Mobile maybe for the UFC? But it seems like there's going to be quite a lot of activations around that week. So if you're coming to Vegas, get prepared, one, to pay stupid prices. I saw one earlier for, to stay in a hotel from the Thursday until, check out on the Sunday. And it was $1,000 a night. And it wasn't even a premium, resort. So it was 3 times the price of what they normally sell. But some packages I've seen have been $2.5 million for a 10-person. You get your suite for the the 3 or 4 days. You get VIP access to all of the stuff from the Thursday. I think it's Thursday practice, Friday practice, Saturday qualifying, Sunday race. Which seems like a lot, but if there's 10 of you, it's $250,000 each. I'm trying to think, is that decent? But maybe they get other perks as well. I imagine they do.
Yeah, you would think, right? For that amount of money, you would hope so. You would hope so. Well, obviously, Mike and I are glad that you kind of landed on your feet. Like you said, it was a little bit of a nerve-wracking time for you during those layoffs at Insider and stuff. But like you said, realistically, and especially in sports media, there's always layoffs at one point or another. So it's unfortunate, but we're glad you landed back on your feet.
I appreciate you.
And staying in the fight game here.
Yeah, that's been the main blessing, being able to even getting a job in sports media, like a full time, enough to live off is hard enough because it's so competitive, I guess. And then to do that in boxing, where it's so niche, and I feel like there's probably very few, jobs that pay. Yeah, so I'm beyond chuffed that I can still carry on.
Were you ever close during the last couple months since April? Like, do you have a percentage of how likely you were that you had to move back to the UK?
I feel like I was always quite the immigration lawyer I hired that was based off. My wife's got a friend here who's a performer on the Strip, but she's English as well, and she recommended this attorney. So I had a chat with him and kind of went through the situation. It kind of felt like it was all going to be fine, but there was just that lingering thing in the back of your head where you don't really ever know. But the things I was focusing on, have already been approved for this visa before. If anything, we're in a better spot now because I'd won more awards with the boxing writers. So it's like you're kind of showing that you're maintaining the same level of quality, I guess, in what you do than when I was before when they approved a visa in 2021. And then when I was getting the paperwork through, from the lawyer, and a lot of it's government issued, just standard, US government forms, it all just seemed like quote unquote change in employment status. So, yeah, I think the hard thing is coming to America, and once you're here, I think it's probably easier to stay. I think the hard thing is actually getting here in the first place, and living obviously and working and having that visa approval.
Right.
But I recommend it to anyone who's thinking of doing it. I love living here. You can't put a price, I think, on waking up in the morning and the sun shining every day. Yeah. I never want to get tired of that, and also just the reliability of the weather. Like in London in the summer, you could go out and I'm wearing a t-shirt and shorts right now. Right. You could go out in London in a t-shirt and shorts in July, and you just won't know if you're going to get rained on or if things are just going to change and you regret not bringing out a long-sleeved sweater or something.
Right.
We don't have any of that here. Although I did recently just drive back from a fight week. We'll go into it later, what the fight week is about. But I drove through a monsoon. I had my first experience of driving through a monsoon. I had emergency alerts coming from Nevada state, government, whatever, saying you are literally in a monsoon. There's flash floods. If you can pull over, but a lot of people were pulling over, but. And my car was having that alert where it was you are aquaplaning, but I never felt not in control of the car. And I was only going 10 miles an hour. I was driving across Lake Mead. And you could even see on the top of some cliffs, new, gushes of water coming down. But I was I couldn't ever see where the flash flood was. There was just a less than half an inch of water on the road, and it was always fine. So I just kept on driving.
Was that your first fight we'll touch on it in a second, but you covered the top-ranked car on ESPN in Glendale, Arizona. Was that your first in-person fight in Arizona?
Yeah, second time I've been in Arizona, but first fight. And I think it's a great state. Even though it's still a desert state, it's way more green and lush than what southern Nevada can be.
Right.
Or Joshua trees and things like that. I think, I felt like I was driving through Joshua Tree, even though Joshua Tree is in California, but I've driven through that before. And it's Arizona's a bit like that. You've got the classic cactus and things like that. They don't seem to grow here. And if you see one in Vegas, it's probably because it's been, ripped out from somewhere else and brought here.
Yeah, I gotcha. So as I touched on this past Saturday, August 12th, from Glendale, Arizona on ESPN, Emmanuel Navarrete improves to 38-1 with 31 KOs as he gets the unanimous decision win over Oscar Valdez. And Navarrete got the scores of 116-112, 118-110, and 119-109. Obviously, for the listeners who saw it, it was an very entertaining fight. Valdez, two Mexican warriors, but Valdez always seems to be in these types of fights. He finds a way. He just always throws it all on the line. But you were in the building. And then we talked about just before we came on air that sometimes, when you watch a fight on TV and when you see it in person, it could be a little different on how you score it. There's obstructions in how you can see. On TV, you have the angles, the aerial views, and all that. But you being in the building, especially with the scores I just read, 116, 112, 118, 110, 119, 109, all those three scores kind of give a different picture of what the fight was like. It's a little bit confusing. So you being in the building, what did you think? What do you think of those scores, and what did you think of the fight?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I thought the fight was amazing. I'm so glad I went on that assignment and got to see it live because, saw some good top-ranked prospects, saw some good, I think there were there were 8 fights, and the first 6 fights, most on the prelims and then some of the fights in the main card, all knockouts, straight knockouts, like good, performances coming in. And another difference, I think, as well, that the fans for this event, they were coming in early. I think the total crowd numbers in the end were about 10,350, around that mark, and there was at least 5,000 people. It was already like half filled by like the third fight, and you rarely see that in boxing. Right. It was well attended, it was well supported, and it just had good energy. The co-main brought things down a little bit. They got booed, probably quite cruelly, but what are you going to do? And then in the main event, but then in the main event, I mean, before the fight, I was thinking Oscar Valdez was going to come away successful. The things I was hearing during the week and speaking to Oscar himself, there are just some people I think that just have it factor, and for me, he has that. Or had it, carries himself like a champion. I find him a really classy guy to be around. That's the second time I've been around him for a fight week. But some things I was hearing was like the thing with Oscar is that he's been in so many wars, and whether, maybe it's one war already too many. But to be honest, I didn't feel it was. I thought he was going to get through to Navarrete. But yeah, as soon as the fight started, it was like really different than what I was expecting. Navarrete was, I gave him every single one of the first 4 rounds. Thought he was like awkward, tricky, really good at range, and it was like Valdez didn't really know what to do. But in my opinion, he made the adjustments in round 5. And there's just kids coming in. He made those adjustments in round 5 by like closing the gap and knowing to fight in there. He's having more success, in my opinion. I gave him round 5. I thought he landed the punch of the night in round 6. And then I think by this point I was starting to focus on my reports. I wasn't really scoring. But from rounds 7 to 12, into like summary, I felt like Oscar Valdez did okay in the third quarter. And I probably gave him 1 or 2 more rounds then, but then it felt in the championship rounds he'd lost it. I think the difference between the two fighters is that Navarrete, with like how many he was just throwing, it was like Oscar Valdez would land one really good punch, but then Navarrete would throw just like go guns like back at him, and it would be like 10, 15 shots, or and Valdez wouldn't be able to defend even half of them. I remember seeing maybe in round 8 or 9, it felt like Navarrete jabbed him maybe 12 times in a row, and Valdez maybe only blocked again half of them. But the thing that I always felt like it was always the sheer volume that was in Navarrete's favor. And even though he was causing it was like the accumulation of the punches were what was causing the eye to close, and that kind of damage. But to me, when it came to that round 7 to 10, it was such a crucial part in the fight. It just felt like Valdez had the shot that would put Navarrete down. I have seen people since online saying they thought Valdez never hurt him. I honestly thought he did. I definitely thought Valdez hurt Navarrete, and definitely had his commanded his respect with those singular shots. But yeah, by the time that we saw Valdez backstage, he was pretty beat up, pretty bad. There was rumours that he'd broken the orbital bone, but yeah, apparently he didn't. In the end, it was just bruising, and thankfully it was bruising rather than anything more severe that would keep him out of the sport for even longer. But I really feel like 109 is an injustice for what I saw. I saw 116 to 112, maybe 115 to 113, but I feel like that's probably being a bit generous towards Valdez, but anything more for Navarrete than 116, I feel is more generous to him. It kind of discounts how dangerous and threatening Valdez was at certain points in the fight, particularly rounds 5, 6, and I think around 9, where he just seemed to have that like singular punch that could have ended up ending things, but it ultimately never did. I really thought it's up there with some of the best, Mexican fights I've seen. Granted, those were on TV and not live, but I mean, I'd even see it again. I feel like out of all the great fights I've seen this year, between Benavidez Plan, Davis Garcia, which had a rematch clause, Spence Crawford, which had a rematch clause, I feel like Valdez did way more than Spence, Ryan Garcia and Caleb Plant. But I think I wouldn't want to see the rematch next. I feel like, Oscar told me in the week he was suffering from depression after he lost to Shakur Stevenson, and it took him, apparently he was saying, like weeks to kind of come around again. So I feel like he would need to, after this fight, kind of come back again and fight the kind of caliber of opponent he fought a couple of months ago, rebuild, and then see what happens, with Navarrete. But yeah, they might have a rivalry going forward. In the arena, I honestly thought there were times when, he did enough to, or threatening to do enough to warrant a rematch, particularly if he started the fight in the first round as he started in the 5th round, because it felt like he kind of just surrendered those first 4 rounds by not being able to adjust sooner to just how awkward and kind of unique Navarrete's style kind of is.
Right, absolutely. Did you see that quote from Valdez? I think it was during fight week, where it was a fight. I think it was out here in Los Angeles. It might have been at the Dignity Health Sports Park, which is the former StubHub Center, Home Depot Center. It's been through a lot of names, but in Carson, California, where I think it was there, where his jaw was broken in the fight. And he had said that during the fight, he thought, that something about his tooth. He thought his tooth came out or something, but he didn't think his jaw was broken. And then he kind of, like during the round or the next round, he felt like, oh no, my teeth are there or something. Like he thought, I didn't think my jaw was broken. That even crossed my mind. I thought it was like my teeth or something. And then I felt, my teeth are still there. I can keep going. I thought that was such a crazy quote to say, because his jaw was literally broken and he felt like, oh no, it was just like my teeth or something. And then once I saw I haven't lost anything. I can go back in there and keep going. I thought that was such a crazy thing for him to realize during that fight. But I mean, maybe it's the adrenaline of a fighter, right?
Yeah. I think there's just some fighters that are just a little bit different, and I think he's one of them, being able to take pain, fight through things. And I don't want to take anything away from other fighters who don't, I think it's perfectly fine in a fight to take a knee, and I think you even should, because if you can kind of surrender a 10-8 round if it's going to mean you can quote unquote waste enough time to get back into the fight, rather than not taking the knee and getting drilled. So I think there's, you're perfectly fine doing that. Daniel Dubois did it a few times, but then obviously he didn't fight through the injury hit that he had to Joe Joyce.
Yeah.
But, these are still fighters that go into the ring and have had good performances before and after that. There's countless that have done things that Daniel Dubois did. But yeah, someone like Oscar Valdez, I just think it's a different kind of mentality that is just so far removed from what a normal human being thinks and does. You saying about the teeth reminded me of a fighter in the UFC. I think it was Smith, where he was getting beaten so bad he was actually he was actually getting his teeth, his teeth had fallen out, and he was picking them up from the canvas while he was still getting punched, and he was giving his teeth to the referee.
Right.
And it's like he was still, trying to get back into the fight, even though he's handing 3 teeth to the ref to put in his pocket so that, might be able to put them back in with dentistry, however many days later but this is that would never occur to me to do. I'd be like, teeth's come out. No, get me out of here. F this. But yeah, other people are, in these sports are wild men.
Yeah, rare breeds, right? Those fighters, they really are. And, focusing on Navarrete, I don't think this is realistic, but I wanted to get your take on this. So obviously there's been some rumblings, and I think Navarrete, he was asked about it, and I think Shakur responded on Twitter, like, kind of saying like, come on, like he's not serious about it. Do you think that's any realistic possibility within the next maybe 6 to 9 months, Navarrete and Shakur, or do you think Shakur is just because he's at 135? This fight was at 130. I mean, should we hold out hope for that potential matchup or no?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I could see it in the next 6 to 9 months. I get the impression Top Rank, particularly maybe Bob Arum and probably even Shakur himself, I feel like they kind of want to target. I think they want to clear out the lightweight division, and whoever's got the belts, I think they want to collect the belts, Terence Crawford style, and then move up to 140. So it really depends on whether Navarrete is going to stay himself at 130 or move up and try and get a title himself. But if that was to happen, I think it would be different. But in that scenario, I can't see it happening in 6 to 9 months. I think it would be more, a period after that, and then, but, if Navarrete got one of those belts and Shakur had another, that's a great in-house Top Rank, champion versus champion fight they could make at 135, providing Navarrete wanted to do that in the first place. So, I can't see it happening in the next 6 to 9 months, but, I'm curious about that fight. I would like to see it myself. I think Navarrete won quite a lot of people over, on a platform like that, 10,000 people in the arena, ESPN, big world title fight. And, granted, I think out of his 12 last title fights, I think he's either 8 or 10 knockouts, but I think half of that run has been against kind of, opposition that you might not think would be in a world title fight, kind of caliber. This is definitely a big fight and definitely a big win for him.
Do you think that maybe within the next 18 months, let's stretch the timeline a little bit, just because, we know us being both in this game here, the politics, the promoter politics, the network alignments and stuff, it's real. It's there, unfortunately, for the fight fans, but it's there. And Shakur, he's one of those guys at the moment who obviously he's very, very talented. So there's not a lot of people who really want to take a risk against him because he's so talented. But, do you think, let me ask you like this, Al, do you think that is a fight between Shakur and Navarrete more likely than if Shakur lands a big name at 135?
Like Lomachenko? Or a big name?
No, I'm not even. Yeah, I think he could land Lomachenko, obviously, but I'm talking about the guys outside of the Top Rank ESPN bubble.
Yeah, like Gervonta Davis and
correct.
I hear you.
Even Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan. I feel like Ryan and Gervonta are kind of flirting with the 140 mark, and what's left at 135. Frank Martin, I still feel like is. I feel like PBC thinks he's kind of 1 or 2 fights behind Isaac Cruz. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they would want the. I don't think it would be in their interests to even maintain a fight with Shakur for Frank, whether it be Isaac Cruz. I feel like they're probably thinking we could get one more win for Isaac, and then that might warrant the Gervonta Davis rematch. I feel like they've got a lot going on their side. Ryan, I feel like if I was Golden Boy, I feel like what they should do is get Ryan a comeback win, and to get him looking good again, and remind everyone that he's this fast-fisted guy who can put people down. I think he needs a performance like that. And then if he then has a good performance against a name at 140, all of a sudden a rematch with Gervonta, it's like all roads lead to a rematch with Gervonta. I'm not trying to suggest that, but money wise, considering that was 1.2 million pay-per-views in the US, and a gate that was like one of the top 5, I think, in Las Vegas boxing history. It makes sense financially to do it again, providing Ryan can be built back to get the momentum and warrant the fan interest. Between those names, I think Top Rank is going to be looking at their own sort of, then you've got Devin Haney, Regis Prograis, all these kind of fighters are just a little bit too big. But out of the Top Rank ones, I feel like Lomachenko and even Tio is at 140 now. But I think it's definitely a possibility, just not in 6 to 9 months. 18 months, I think, is a good timeline.
18 months, yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. And then, you touched on Haney. Obviously, he has the undisputed title at 135. How much longer do we see him, not only at the weight? I think it's, it's going to be quick, but how often, if you had to guess, before he just vacates those titles and just completely moves up to 140?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that's kind of already might be, maybe not the vacating the titles part, but it feels like, he's kind of already making those moves now. So the fight with Prograis would be at 140. And those are quote unquote ongoing negotiations, from from two people I spoke to today, like the deal's not done, but that's the talk. And Las Vegas would be the target city for that fight. And I really like that fight. And I think it's one. I saw Prograis live for the first time in 2019, and I actually think he got a draw with Josh Taylor, even though I was, British, and I thought that was a draw. I thought it was a major draw. But Taylor got the decision on the judges' scorecards that night. But just ever since, not sure Prograis really done that much. If Haney hadn't just kind of struggled to get a win against Lomachenko, I'd have easily picked Haney. So I feel like I really like that match to kind of see, what both guys can offer. But yeah, I don't think Haney would, maybe he would move back down to 135. But he is such a. It feels like I don't think he gets the praise he deserves for doing what he's done in quite a short space of time, like going over to Australia twice and bringing back the belts. The first time going back and defending it.
Do you think it's more because he doesn't? Obviously, to us, we have a little bit more of an eye than the average fan, and he definitely has excellent boxing skills. But do you think because he's not like a KO artist, he really hasn't garnered that attention?
Probably, which is why I think he should just fully lean into being a heel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a Mayweather HBO 24/7 days. Yeah,
someone he's kind of modeled himself on anyway. Yeah, I would just go full heel and maybe even turn on the fans.
It could work.
Yeah, he's like, if you're not going to tune in to see him win and showcase his boxing skills, tune in to see him, to see that he might, on the off chance, lose.
Right, absolutely.
But yeah, I think that might be a part of it, and maybe it's something that Shakur Stevenson might have to come to terms with, but figure out a way to get the kind of casual interest. But I feel like he will do that naturally anyway because of his friendship and with Terence Crawford, and with Crawford being a kind of mentor to him, like the kind of victory lap that Terence Crawford's doing right now. Like I don't think it was a knee-jerk reaction. I tweeted as soon as Crawford won. I said that's one of the new faces. I think I even said that's the new face of American pay-per-view boxing. But it's not to do with what the numbers for the Spence fight generates. I think what's really going to be interesting. Crawford's now in the PBC family. Who he fights next? I've been told that Errol Spence won't really be activating that rematch clause until basically right at the last minute to see how we feel. Take that full 30 days that you get in the contracts before you can activate it to, recover, get over your injuries, spend time with your family, figure out what, kind of you want and your team and whatever. But yeah, so regardless of whether, Terence is going to fight him or maybe he fights Jamel once Jamel's kind of had his fight with Canelo, there's just options for Terence, and it seems like quite a few of them are pretty big. So I'm really curious what his numbers are going to be after that, because we know his pay-per-view numbers weren't really impressive before Spence. So it really feels like that was such a lot for whoever won, doesn't matter if it's Spence or Crawford, such a launch pad to push them into a realm that they'd never been in before in terms of box office draw ability. And just, having Shakur next to him, I feel like some of that shine might come on Shakur Stevenson as well, just because it's okay, so Crawford's the best male American boxer in America right now, if not the world. Shakur's probably the future number one male boxer in America, if not the world. And it's like you've got them right now. So I feel like there's probably quite an easy way they can market themselves together. And Shakur, I think his popularity will grow naturally anyway, because he's coming into the ring and he's going to beat, whoever, and maybe he gets the Lomachenko fight and beats him, maybe even better than Devin Haney did, because that was a bit of a controversial result. I think looking back, I think I might have had Lomachenko just nicking it. And I'm sure I only heard 2 reporters that felt like Devin won, Mike Coppinger was one, and one of the Fight Height guys was another, Ron Goodall. They had Devin winning. So yeah, if Shakur can look good against Lomachenko, and well, still cultivate the sort of being on camera with Crawford, I feel like he won't have the issue that Devin has in terms of people decide being unsure whether they even want to tune in to see him fight. I feel like anyone who's watching this is on the edge should be. These are the stars of American boxing.
Do we know? You touched on Al of the rematch clause between Spence and Crawford, that there's a 30-day window, and you think Spence, you've been told, or what you've been hearing, Spence might activate it right at the last minute. If it's not activated, or if it is activated, but there was reports that by December, I think even Crawford said it, that the rematch has to happen by December or something like that. Does PBC have any options in addition to the rematch clause with Spence on Crawford if that Spence rematch doesn't happen right away?
No, do you mean like if the Spence rematch doesn't happen, does PBC have an option with Crawford? Is
correct?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, he's part of the PBC family now, as
okay.
far as I'm aware, or as what I've been told. Yeah. Plus, they've got the fights for him though as well. It makes sense him kind of doing a PBC swing now. And like the money that he would have been seeing now as the pay-per-views got tabulated, and his, the back end check for him is being cut. It really makes sense to feel like, they can put on, they can not only provide the opponent, but they can put on and, quote unquote, an event that would draw in the eyes and the figures. So yeah, even if you're looking out, if the Spence Jr. rematch doesn't happen and Jamel, fights Canelo, whatever the result there is, and that might take time for, Crawford to eventually fight Jamel. I'm not even sure Jamel will come back down to 154. But, let's just remove those 2 possibilities. There's still like, Tim Zhu and, there's loads of 154 guys. Trying to think of a few, but I don't want to Tony Harrison, Lubin, Ramos. I feel like PBC's got an embarrassment of riches at 154, and it just depends. You've got those 4 that I just mentioned don't have the name or brand value that I guess Jamel or particularly Jamel after a Canelo fight or Spence, the brand value that they would bring to the A or B side or whatever, however it would be. Crawford for me should be the A side now. You probably need to have like some sort of round robin where someone looks great, or whoever just has a great fight. Like Fundora looked like he could be the man. Right. Even 9 months ago, things can change in boxing quite quickly, and perception can change. But I feel like out of all of the promoters, the opponents for Crawford now are in the PBC roster. And as far as I'm aware and what I've been told, they do. He is in their roster now. Like he's a part of it.
And then also this past Saturday, August 12th, from the O2 Arena, Anthony Joshua returns with a knockout over Robert Helenius, who takes the 5th professional loss of his career. This was a 7th round KO. So Helenius, if people kept up with the drama during this fight and event, Helenius was a late substitution as the opponent because Dillian Whyte, who was the original opponent for this event against Anthony Joshua, failed a drug test. So before we get your take on AJ's KO victory over Helenius, Al, I want to get your reaction on White's failed drug test and obviously his removal from the event. Give us your reaction on that, because we know that he's had some run-ins in the past with situations like that. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I've got a relative. I will caveat what I'm about to say by saying I've got a relatively blasé attitude to policing drugs and performance-enhancing drugs. I think it's I think it's just a losing battle, whether it's a war on drugs for recreational use or a war on drugs in sport. But and there's also like so many substances on the banned list. But if it's so easy for me if I was thinking, or anyone, what you're doing and eating, and you have to be really, I don't know what would be the right word, but you just have to not be paying attention to fail a drug test. But to do it repeatedly, from, once in 2009, second time I think was 2019 against Oscar Valdez, and now this time, yeah. I mean, I just think it paints a very, very poor picture of Dillian Whyte's. If he's just going to say he unknowingly did it, then pay attention. This has happened like twice in your career before. It feels like anyway he's kind of on the tail end of his career, but whether this could be the end of him, I really don't know. Like, I think in any other sport it would be, but it's boxing, and I don't particularly feel like the outrage has been worse than what it was with Jarrell Miller, for instance. But Jarrell Miller's like cocktail of performance enhancing drugs he was taking, it was so clear that you wouldn't be able to unknowingly do the things that were, I believe, that were on his the things that Jarrell Miller had taken. But he's been fighting since, and even after he was banned or tested positive for the Anthony Joshua fight when Andy Ruiz came in at last minute and beat Joshua in what was seen as like a massive shock for, on the British side. I don't know if it was a shock from like American observers, but
it definitely was.
Yeah, what a shock! Yeah. I suppose that I remember. I think it was 40-1. He was the.
Yeah. I know some people who they always put money on the underdog in Vegas, and they won big on Ruiz. So even paid their mortgage for the whole year.
Oh my God! I need to do that. I need to get in on that.
Yeah,
but yeah, I spoke to Eddie Hearn later that year, like for an interview for loads of things. But one of them was like, this like drugs drama, and I said, I can remember saying like. Sometimes in boxing it seems like scandal can make things bigger, like in a way that doesn't mean it's negative. Like how big, like is Jarrell Miller against Anthony Joshua in New York where Joshua just lost, is that a big fight? And Hearn said that that's an effing massive fight. So it feels like even though and the outrage for Miller was so much more intense than any other outrage and like drugs tests I think we've even seen in boxing over the years since then. So maybe Whyte comes again, but for me I think it's it felt like he was on the tail end of his career anyway. He's just done this. It's the third time it's happened to him. It's I don't know. It's all different situations. Like with Conor Benn as well. It's like how much goodwill can you just erase, and turn people off just with like your whole attitude to the board, to fans, the way that you're tweeting and things like this. But I do know, like internally, that like there's with Ben's camp, with Matchroom, with DAZN, they really, really think that that he was innocent, and it just feels like with Dillian Whyte, the organizations were kind of moving away. Like I don't think Dillian Whyte is not part of the Matchroom roster, but it feels like there was a lot of distance being taken with Dillian, and there wasn't that distance being taken with Conor Benn. It feels like he is still part of the Matchroom DAZN family, and they're supporting him and things like this. And I don't think Dillian Whyte's really being supported. So maybe that can be telling in and of itself as well.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a good point to make, that if you compare the Conor Benn situation with this Dillian Whyte situation, there is definitely a contrast in between both. I don't know. Maybe Matchroom really believes that Conor Benn's innocent, and
I honestly think they do. Yeah. From what I've spoken to, like people at Matchroom and DAZN, I feel it does feel like they really do think that he's innocent and believe him and want to support him in that. But yeah, there was Amir Khan as well. Has got like a retroactive ban, so can't help but feel like what the hell is going on in British boxing.
Right. Yeah, it's all popping up over there, pun intended, I guess. But going back to the actual fight, obviously Helenius was a late substitution here, and got knocked out in the 7th round. This was actually AJ's first KO stoppage since December 2020. So it's been a couple of years. That's when he knocked out Kubrat Pulev in December 2020. So what'd you think about the performance? Did you give Helenius even a slight? I mean, obviously you always have a puncher's chance in a fight, but realistically, did you give him any type of realistic chance when he became the late substitution?
No. And it's not like disrespect to Helenius. Like I remember him fighting. He's been around for more than a decade in the European scene, but his time at the place in the rankings where Joshua should be competing against, his time there is, beyond gone. And considering what Deontay Wilder, how easily he handled Helenius, I was kind of. I also feel like you've just got to put on a certain performance to remind people, or if to remind people who you are. I feel like Canelo needed to knock out Golovkin to remind people and re-establish momentum that he had prior. Losing to Bivol, I feel like he was expected to beat Bivol, and then he just struggled with him, and like Bivol's fainting and his like tripling of the jab, and Canelo just didn't know what to do with him at all, and even whether that was like he wasn't getting the best advice from Eddie Reynoso in the corner during the fight, but neither of them knew what to do, to thwart what Bivol was doing. And I feel like he really needed a bigger performance against Golovkin, and he didn't show it. So then all of a sudden, the narrative could be, is Canelo slipping? And again, like John Ryder, perfect opponent to kind of like build a really big, performance against. But with Joshua, I feel like, after going 2 fights against Usyk, who granted is probably, the best cruiserweight of all time, one of the pound for pound top fighters. If Usyk goes and beats Fury, he suddenly becomes the pound for pound number one. Really talented, extraordinarily talented guy with all that Olympic background as well. That's being able to offset his, lack of height. He's like 6'3", 6'4" probably, but against this like new generation of super heavyweights, he's the little guy. Joshua did better in the second fight, but he needed a big performance to reestablish, that he is in this mix of, Fury, Usyk. I think Wilder is still in the mix just because of how powerful he is. But, the first few rounds, it's just, I feel like I would have wanted to have seen the knockout in by the third round, with all things considered. But I still think there's the element of, the withdrawal happened so late. I don't think even organisers knew until the Saturday. So that's 7 weeks before the fight. There's a scrambling to bring in an opponent to save the whole show, so that fighters on the undercard can get paid. Joshua's kind of signing off on, he's been preparing to fight someone else, and now he's, things like that can, make you, if everyone had a full camp, would he have knocked out Helenius faster? I think probably. But I feel like with Joshua, it's just I don't think he knows. It's not like a take to say this. It's been said before. I don't think he knows who he is as a fighter. He's going from like trainer to trainer to trainer. And they're like whatever style he's kind of adapted, and since like Klitschko and Ruiz, I wouldn't say ruined him, but ruined the version that was, before, when he fought Dillian Whyte for the first time, and was being billed as this like Olympic killer, and the kind of golden boy of not just British boxing but British sport. I remember speaking to Sky Sports, and they were really, really adamant that this guy was going to be like a Roger Federer for boxing, like clean cut, good looking, and could carry not just the British flag but like the whole of boxing on his shoulders. And then obviously gets upset by Ruiz, and kind of that changes. But I just feel like he's not who he was anymore, and he doesn't know who he is, and he's way too tentative. And those 2 fights, Klitschko and Ruiz, I think it made him very aware of his lack of punch resistance compared to other heavyweights. And I think the thing with like Tyson Fury, he's been on the floor, but he recuperates pretty quickly. There's some fighters just handle being hit differently, and I don't think Joshua handles it very well from what we've seen.
Do we see Wilder? Do we see Wilder in the next 6 to 9 months? I really
think so. Yeah, I really think so. It's from what I was hearing last week. Skill Challenge, which is the promotional company in Saudi Arabia, they had representatives in London throughout the fight week, and that there would be getting ready to prepare a bid to host it. And I feel like the bid would have to be pretty big for it to not even be on the radar really in American boxing, because if you were going to put it in Vegas, you could easily have a $15 to $20 million gate, if not more, and I think you could easily sell 500 to 800,000 pay-per-views. So you're definitely looking at like an 80. I'm doing very quick math. I think it's like $80 million, let's say, or 100 in total between the revenue for pay-per-view and the gate. So I feel, if Saudi Arabia's going to, Skill Challenge is going to be able to, front a guarantee for both fighters for 50 million each, then it just makes sense to that. I think that's the reason why we're not really hearing it. That there might be a tug of war between, we might want to host it in Vegas or New York or somewhere like that. It just feels like it's a very Saudi Arabia fight for January. I feel like they've probably by now, if they haven't wrapped up the Joshua side by now, they probably will in the next couple of days, and then it comes down to the Deontay Wilder part. I've heard over here that Showtime Sports would be, really, really interested in broadcasting it. But as far as I'm aware, I think the thing with when Saudi Arabia, I keep saying Saudi Arabia, it kind of annoys me when people in boxing say the Saudis. It's like, be specific about who's actually hosting it, like Prince Khalid and Skill Challenge Promotions. But when they host a fight, they want to control everything, and then they kind of auction off various parts of it. So like whether Showtime would win that auction to, it's not like they would be guaranteed to broadcast the fight. But to me, it makes sense because they've got all the reel of, having worked with Deontay Wilder, and they've even aired an Anthony Joshua fight before, maybe even two, before he joined DAZN, when they worked with Sky Sports, I guess, and Matchroom. But yeah, so they've got relationships with both fighters. It makes sense that they were the broadcast partner over here. But I feel like, so to cut a long story short, the Anthony Joshua side, I think, is kind of like almost a foregone conclusion. It's just then speaking to Deontay and then wrapping his side up. But yeah, I feel like that is, we've had such a good run of super fights, like in 1 year. Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia, Spence Crawford, Canelo is going to be a good one, no matter who he kind of fights, as long as he's fighting. I mean, that's an undisputed champion against an undisputed champion. That should be celebrated, even though they're kind of, two weight classes apart. But yeah, this to me always felt like the next super fight. And I feel like the time's just right, because if Anthony Joshua fights, no disrespect to Anthony Joshua, but if he fights anyone in the top 5, 6, I feel like he's a knockout threat. And then all of a sudden, this payday goes away. Maybe the Tyson Fury payday goes away. It's like you want to get the payday now. I would pick Wilder. Like, he's not gun shy, and I feel like Joshua kind of is a little bit gun shy, or a lot gun shy. And Wilder has been down, and he gets up, and he just wants to carry on fighting. And I think if Joshua goes down, there's something in him that says, "I'm good." So I'd love to see it, but I just feel like Wilder wins, but I would definitely love to see it. I feel like it takes a little bit of sheen when it's in Saudi Arabia, though. I will also say that. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, we would love it for it to happen in obviously Vegas, New York, LA,
London.
Even London,
like stadium
even
fight.
London,
There's so many better places to host it. We've got an American and a British fighter. If it was in Vegas, I'm not sure. There was a time where I think it would be like Mayweather, Ricky Hatton. With like the sheer number of traveling British fans, and the whole how hot that fight felt. Thank you.
Kids walking in on Al Dawson here on the Last Round podcast, though.
Showing me his Spideys. So there was a time where I feel like it could have been like a modern version of Mayweather and Hatton, just in terms of how feverish it would felt for the fans involved. But I feel like the British fans would still travel to Joshua. It's just he's gone from being a stadium fighter consistently and being able to outsell even the England national soccer team.
Right. He misses dad. He's like, hey, when are you going to come out? I'm waiting.
It's gone from a stadium fighter, selling out 90,000 tickets back down to an arena fighter. I just hope, if it was going to be in Vegas or anywhere, I just would hope they was going to travel. But all of that's mute. It's going to be happening in Saudi Arabia in January.
Right. And then we touched on Undisputed. So this week is a kickoff press conference for Canelo Charlo, first first leg is in New York, and the secondary leg is in LA. So, by the time people are listening to this, I think, some of them might have happened in New York, might have happened or something. But, just give me your take. What do you think is going to happen at the presser? I mean, because we know the Charlo brothers, they love to talk, and sometimes they're involved in some crazy stuff. Do we see? Let me ask you like this, Al. Do we see any type of, retroactive, I guess, view of the Plant situation that happened in Beverly Hills during the Canelo Plant kickoff press tour?
Oh yeah, I feel like Jamel. It depends. Like, nothing would surprise me with the Charlos, but they do definitely bring like a angry kind of energy to wherever they are, and even in when Crawford had just knocked down Spence, and then he was hanging over the rope and saying, "You're next," and Jamel didn't have any chill even then, and he's saying that no, he's got his own stuff to go on, but he was like, I can't remember what the exact quote was, but he was mouthing off back to Terence, and then on the All Access epilogue, James Harden, the basketball player, was saying, "Oh, we're gonna have that fight," and Jamel was like, even just having angry energy to him, going, "I've got my own stuff going on, and undisputed." Then, of course, there was a bit of a spill out with his brother Jamal getting slapped by Caleb Plant, and that was inside one of the hallways, and then there was like the commotion spilled out into the parking lot, and I think the partners of the Charlos were kind of getting into it as well. So Jamel could be quiet and kind of I don't know. Nothing would surprise me, but it would also, I think, I think it would be better if he was saying something to Canelo, because Canelo's now at the point where he would respond, and he'd respond in English.
Yeah.
Just like he did with payday, and get the F out of here, man. And, like his personality's coming through a lot more, in, English speaking. Obviously the personality was already there in Spanish and stuff, but I just feel, I feel like his level of fame kind of grew another notch when people that didn't know Spanish could suddenly understand, get a sense of how he was handling trash talk and things. So I'd love to see Jamel bring that kind of energy at one of these press dates, whether it's in New York or Los Angeles, and just find out how Saul will react. Right.
Yeah, I think that whole situation, the Charlo brothers, they're so polarized. They're very polarizing, both of them, for the sport. But they go through these peaks and valleys in their own personal lives, and then sort of reportedly they're both not getting along with each other, even though they're brothers. It's a crazy situation, but they're very polarizing to watch from the outside as athletes. And then obviously Jamal was supposed to initially get the fight reportedly with Canelo, and then for some reason or another he couldn't, and then his brother stepped in. It's like, man, like what a turn of events that is. But I'm definitely looking forward to that. And like you said, you touched on it, Canelo, especially since he's left Golden Boy. After that separation, he has been a little bit more vocal in interviews and in press conferences, and speaking English and stuff. So giving us those quotes like he did after the Billy Joe Saunders fight against Demetrius Andrade and all that. He throws his sound bites out there. So I could see something happening. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I didn't think him and Plant were going to go at it. I didn't think Plant was going to swing at him, and then Canelo was going to. I didn't think that was going to happen, and that happened.
With a cut on his face, didn't he, in return?
Right. So I mean, we'll see, because the Charlo brothers, especially. And do you think Jamal will be in attendance?
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I think Eddie Reynoso even said Jamal was next.
Right.
So from what I've heard, that is probably, that's not out of the question, for Jamal to get the first fight on the Canelo's 3-fight PBC deal and Jamal to be the second. So depends how the Charlo brothers want to handle, that kind of situation. But, if you're going to have two of them kind of drawing off with them for the try and have the intimidation factor, or just try and lure him into a false sense of security or something. But Canelo's been in so many fights that it's like,
right.
Whatever you're going to do is going to have hardly any effect on him.
Absolutely. And then one final thing that I wanted to get your take on, Al, before we finish up here on the last round. Obviously, we're very appreciative every time you come on the show here. So the UFC is currently in an antitrust case. I've had some boxing fans kind of ask me about it. And you obviously cover MMA as well. And the overview of the case is kind of like, the monopoly. UFC is kind of like a monopoly, and all that. Can you kind of give us an update on what's going on with that? I mean, do we think that UFC in the coming years will kind of have the boxing model that boxing has with these separate promoters and these network alliances? What do you think? What's your take on it?
It's so hard to kind of forecast the future, but the guys that have been reporting on it really well, John Nash at Bloody Elbow, one of them, they from what I saw, they did seem to think that it was going to be a massive shake-up in the UFC. But for background, for anyone who, like boxing fans who might not know, the judge was basically ruling on how UFC used various, or is alleged to use various maneuvers that ensured that, one, that they would be buying up, rival promotions, and two, keep fighter pay low and just manipulate certain things to ensure that they became, or are, what was being called a monopsony. So it was like they're the only buyer in the market. Because if you're not in the UFC, if things are changing maybe a little bit, but the change is so slow because UFC just controls, not controls, but they're so powerful in the sport of MMA. It would be like PBC and Top Rank and Golden Boy and Ludabella and Dimitri Salita and Tom Loeffler all being one company, and all those fighters are at one company, and kind of freezing out, I guess, British boxing, which is kind of frozen out anyway, in my opinion. British boxing is in a bit of a weird state at the moment. It would be like that kind of situation where, you do get, Bellator have kind of been around. They got some decent fighters, but they just don't have the, kind of pulling power or the brand name and recognition that the UFC has. But this antitrust thing has been going on since, I think, it's been going on years, since
right.
at least maybe 2016. And it's been led by former fighters. So I think the way that this new thing is working is that all fighters on the roster, I think, a default position is that they would also be suing, so that the payout could be quite significant for fighters who would have been effectively underpaid. The argument is even someone like Conor McGregor could have been underpaid because suddenly he's coming into boxing and fighting Floyd Mayweather and earning exorbitant amounts more than what he ever did, in his whole UFC career combined. And the same thing's happening in Francis Ngannou. Same thing, I think, even happened with Jake Paul. I think Nate Diaz earned more for the Jake Paul fight than he did in his entire UFC career. And that guy's been in the UFC for more than a decade.
That's insane.
Yeah, and suddenly as soon as he fought Conor McGregor for the first time and beat him, he was always seen as a cult hero, but his fame suddenly exploded even more so after that. And even after that, his accumulated paychecks was still apparently lower than what he got just for going into a boxing ring and losing to Jake Paul. So I think the default position is that all the fighters on the roster now are in the pool to sue, and they have to opt out. So that will be a really interesting scenario. Who actually stays in? Because you would think that there's probably a message going around with the UFC to get people to opt out, or say it's in their best interest to opt out, or various. I don't know how they would work it, but yeah, there's definitely it's definitely going to be if you're in the let's say me and you and we'll welcome Mike back onto the podcast
eventually.
Eventually, yeah. 5 or 10 years we'll get him back on, and we'll look back at this moment, and from the people that have been covering it really well, like John Nash, feel like they've been saying it will be seen as a landmark period in MMA, in UFC, but also MMA history.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely intriguing to watch it unfold, especially with the the merger with WWE and Endeavor. Obviously, they're becoming. I think the official name that they have that I've seen on SEC documents in the United States is like New Whale Inc. Or it's one of them. It's called New Whale Incorporated or something. I don't know. It's probably like a play on words, like, oh, we're a big whale company or something. But I think, for them, obviously it's a great business decision in terms of, profitability, but it's only going to bring more eyeballs and more scrutiny to them because they're becoming bigger and bigger and bigger with that acquisition, right?
The other thing that I was like, it seems like boxing is the odd one out now. If the WWE and the UFC are, that this parent company owns both. Like we even said it on this podcast. I think it was just before. It was probably around September, October. It might have even been November last year. It might have even been on the Christmas show where we did the quiz, right. Which I will want to come back on this year.
Oh no, he's already prepared for that. Trust me. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure. Like we're talking about WWE. She was, the then co-CEO. I think she was at the time, Stephanie McMahon. She even had this line in I can't remember if it was like a shareholder meeting or it was an environment like that had just, come up in, a wrestling blog, and then I saw it and wrote a story around it. But yeah, she was saying that WWE would be interested in, boxing and putting together boxing events. It was very vague, but they had a clear interest in boxing. So there was like, you could even, think how that would work because, they would have to either recruit like an Olympian who's just turned pro and, build a star up, or you just come in and buy Golden Boy or buy 360 Promotions or DeBella Inc. or Top Rank. Or PBC, you could buy any, who would make sense, considering it, the WWE and the UFC involved, who's really of that stature. It'd be either PBC or Top Rank, really. It does make me think. It does make me think, like, could.
I mean, Dana White has said for the last couple of years, especially since the Conor McGregor Mayweather event, that he's, I have plans to go into boxing, and then he would say, oh no, it's on the back burner, and then he's like, oh yeah, I'm still looking into it. So like, it's still kind of in the back of his mind. Maybe now that Endeavor kind of owns WWE and UFC, they're all kind of essentially under one umbrella. Maybe they'll talk to Dana White and WWE, and then they're like, hey, let's explore this to see how viable this is.
If they try and relaunch or, resurface like Surfer Inc., I don't think that's the really way to do it. Like Dana says some things where it's like, let's get involved in boxing. And then he kind of criticizes boxing and he calls every event a going out of sale situation. And I'm sure he'd probably criticize boxing this year, but I just don't see how you can with the year boxing has had. And really it's been led by PBC. So if you're going to try and buy anyone, just have to try and bid big for probably PPC, but really you will probably want to buy both PPC and Top Rank, and kind of merge them somehow. Right. But again, this is like fantasy football or something.
Right. Yeah.
It's probably a lot harder to do in practice.
I mean, with UFC having the ESPN relationship and Top Rank already being in the ESPN family, I think that would be a natural conversation starter for them. Like, oh well, they're already here. Like, why don't we just look at them? So yeah. I could see that. Yeah. But like you said, it's like fantasy football right here, speculation and all that. It's fun to go down these pathways here. But Al, obviously, like I said, I keep repeating it, but it never gets old. We obviously appreciate every time you come in here on the Last Round podcast. The next time you come on here, Mike might be here eventually.
Yeah, we might allow him back.
Yeah.
I quite like sitting in his chair, though.
So yeah, I'll make sure he's the first listener to this entire episode. But like we touched on at the beginning, you're now with new outlets after leaving the Insider after seven years, but you're now relocated here in the West Coast of the United States. And before we completely sign off here, go ahead and let the listeners know for the first time ever here, at least on the Last Round podcast, where they can find you and follow you as of today.
Yeah, but I appreciate always, coming on. I'll always come on with you guys. you do, great stuff, and you're really nice to be around, both you and Mike. You can find me, like, my social media handle is always Alan Dawson Sport, AlanDawson Sport, mainly on Twitter, but I'll still probably be on Twitter. But yeah, now I'm the news editor at ProBox TV, boxing and MMA videographer at Fight Hype. I've got a weekly combat sports column at the Sporting Tribune, and feature writer at PBC.
Yeah, you're definitely busy, huh? You still probably got more stuff down the pipeline coming down, right?
Yeah. A couple of things potentially coming up that should get a bit more work. But really, I like the idea of just being on a retainer, so you know where you are every month. But if and when these other projects come in, I'll take a look at them. But yeah, there's definitely some good stuff, hopefully, to come as well.
Awesome. So for once again, on behalf of my normal co-host, Michael Shepard, who's not here this week, he'll be back soon, hopefully. Eventually. I'll use the word eventually. And for my late substitution in Alan Dawson of Fight Hype, the Sporting Tribune, PBC, and many others to come, possibly in the future. And for me, Danny Z, this is the last round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.